Hello, welcome back to Laser Cut and Fly RC Models. I'm the Laser Model Guy. What I want to do today is carry on with the build of the Spitfire. I've got the main wing, or the main plane, is now complete without the ailerons being fitted yet, but the main structure is complete. The main fuselage is more or less complete as well. So what I'm going to do today is have a look at the tail plane, what we do with the hinge that we've already fitted, and how we finish that off. And also I'm going to look at connecting the wing onto the fuselage so we get the whole structure complete. When that's done, we'll be looking to cover the plane, and we'll be more or less done. So let's get going. Okay, to start with, I'm going to just deal with the tail plane itself, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the hinges in, because as I showed you in the previous video, they're just the hinges are just sat in these slots that I've cut in the tail plane and the elevator. So the way we stick those in is just using a little bit of super glue. Now these hinges, they are flock coated, which means that when we put a drop of super glue on them, it spreads, or it wicks. And so what will happen is, if I put a drop of super glue in the centre, that will spread into the hinge, in between the hinge and the balsa, and then it'll stick it firmly in place. But I'll also put a little drop at the back as well, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side too. Now I'd originally planned to cover the item, or cover the parts, and then after that fix them together, but I've decided now that I'm going to fix them together first and then cover them. So just a slight change of plan, but and I'll show you how we do that. So all I do is just bend that hinge back a little and put one drop of super glue in the centre, just like that, making sure it goes down, of course. Oops, I don't want too much on the wood, because there's a risk you'll stick the components together. And then put some on each side, tiny drop, and then what you've got to do, or what you must do, is you've got to move the hinge so that it doesn't so that the wood doesn't stick together. Just do the same on this side now. And the other thing to bear in mind while you're manipulating this is to just make sure that the gap in the centre doesn't grow. Okay, and so that's the mylar hinges now in place, and they're now stuck in. So all I'll do is I'll just make sure that remains flexible, make sure they remain pressed in. Oh, they're not moving anymore, so they're well stuck, and all we do is now we'll be ready to cover the tail plane. I'm going to cover it before I fit it, just because it'll be easier to get a nice flat surface. But I'm going to leave a strip down the middle, so that when we fit it into the fuselage here, I'll have some wood on wood for us to for us to stick that in. Okay. So what I'm going to use to cover this is on the top side of the aeroplane. I'm going to use a nice what you call a DPM, or a disruptive pattern material. It's a bit in keeping with the with how the plane would have been originally painted. And then on the underside I'm going to use a nice grey, which is what the underside of the Spitfire would have been covered in back in the day. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to do the underside of the tailplane. I'm going to do that with this nice grey. And all I'm going to do is just tack that in place, just like that, around the outside, just in a number of places. And I'm going to do both the elevator and the tailplane itself at the same time. And then what I will do is I'll just cut straight down the middle carefully with a model knife, and then fold it into the crease, and then we'll see how that looks in just a second. Okay, so you can see how that the hot iron sticks the material on, and on the inside of this material there is an adhesive, and you can see maybe catching the light a little bit there where the adhesive's melted. And all you do is you melt that on, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow along, and I'm going to cut through the centre where the two meet, and then I'm going to fold it into the join in the middle. So let me just, by doing this now, by using the heat all over, I'll be able to identify exactly where that line is. Okay, so you can now clearly see where the line of the fold follows down. So just want to cut down there. And then cut along the whole length of the just down there like that. Cut the next piece, and now we're in a position where we can fold that in and iron it into the V shapes, or the chamfers that we cut, which will allow us to move the elevator. And what I'll do is, where we leave a little bit of exposed wood right in the centre, what I will do there is I will just use a little bit of grey colour, using a grey Sharpie, just to take that away. Okay. Okay, so just a case of now finishing this off. So I'll go around the edges now and just make sure that that's well sealed on there, and of course the top coat or the top cover with our camouflage material will come down to overlap there on the edge. Next, I'll show you. We'll just put the material on the top side, and that'll be the tail plane then covered. And now this material has got a backing sheet, so we just need to peel that off. Slightly different type of cover. So we just remove that and place that in place. So I'll put that in place, and I'll do exactly the same with this side as we've just done with the other side. Okay, and when we're just tacked on like that, I will again trace down that line and we'll cut it so that we can do either side separately. And I'll do that now with a ruler. Okay, so that's the tail covered, and our hinges are now glued in. We're ready to fit this, I think, to the fuselage, and then we can carry on with the build. Okay, so next I'm going to fit the tailplane into the fuselage. Now, there's a slot that was cut into the keel itself, which you remember when we assembled the keel of the aircraft, there was a slot cut into this, and the tailplane will just fit straight into that slot, and then we'll glue it in place. Now I've put the fuselage on this grid so that I can look along the grid, and then I'm going to look from above to make sure that we are properly lined up and that our tailplane is square or at right angles to the main fuselage. So obviously that's very important that we do that. So I'll take some glue and I'm going to put this on the tailplane itself, straight in the middle, right down the centre, but I'm only going to go to around halfway along, because what I'm aware of, or what I'm conscious of, is that when we slide this in, I don't want glue pushing to the back and going into the joint here. So what I'll do is I'll put this in place, and then I'll apply glue. Then I'll apply glue afterwards along both sides, from the top and from the bottom. But in the first instance, let's just slide this into place. All the way in, and then what we'll do is we'll look, as I say, from above, making sure that that is absolutely central in the first instance, and then at right angles, making sure that we've got the tailplane in exactly the right place. There we go, and that looks around about perfect. Okay, so I'm looking at these two points at the tip to make sure that they are on exactly the same line. Okay, so the tail's firmly in now, and that's all secured. So what I want to do next is I want to position the servos. Now, the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to feed the servo through these two stringers here and get it flush with the stringers, but then I'm going to connect it to the actual keel in here. So I'll use a little bit of hot glue there just to connect it to the keel when it's flush with this with the stringers, and then I'll just fill in this little space next to it with wood, with balsa, so that I can bring the cover right up to it, and all we'll have is the little blue rectangle in the center there showing through the cover. Okay, so I'll do that now, and then you'll be able to see exactly how that looks. Okay, so I just want this nice and flush with the stringers, so the cover will look right. So just put a small blob of hot glue in there, just like that, and then I'll just hold that in place just there until that sets. Okay, so that's connected in now, so all we'll do is connect that to the correct wire, and we'll feed that through and firm it up inside. But what we'll do is we'll have a rod going from here to the elevator, and we'll insert a horn just there, and then that will operate the elevator. And then we'll do something similar on the other side to operate the rudder when we connect the rudder. So the next thing I think we need to do now is we need to attach the wing or the main plane to the fuselage, and the way I'm going to do that is I've just sat the plane or the main plane on the edge there, so that the undercarriage is out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is position the fuselage on there, and making sure that these two cables that are going to be connecting come out on either side, just like that, and this one on this side here, and they'll go into those grooves as explained earlier. Now the next thing to do is to carefully measure this and make sure that we are in exactly the right position for central, and to make sure that we're very, very straight. So all I'm going to do now is get a ruler, and I'm going to measure each side, and I'm going to make sure that we're centered at the front and at the back. So, and then I'll mark up, and we'll be able to put some glue on, and we'll be able to fasten the two components together. Okay, so that's all fastened on now, and we're beginning to see the whole thing begin to take shape. So what I need to do now is just connect the ailerons, and then we'll be able to close those in. So making sure that the yellow wire is on the same side, just plug those in, and then that will be able to fit straight into that slot that we previously made. So I'll do the same on the other side. Just like that. Now before we do anything, what I want to do again is test those servos, just to make sure that they are both operating, that side and this side, because although we did test them before, we've done a lot since then, and before we close anything in, I want to make sure it's all working correctly. So I've got a transmitter. I'll just grab a battery. If I turn the transmitter on, connect the battery. Okay, I'll just put the battery there for now, and all I'm going to do is just check that they work properly, and yeah, they're absolutely fine. So with the servos now proven and they're fine, all I want to do is make sure that this cable goes right into that slot there that's been cut for it, and I'll do the same on the other side. And then what I can do is I can fit the wood that I'd cut originally for it. So I'll just slide that in both sides, just like that, on top of the cables and under this former here. And I'll just cut a piece and put that in on both sides, and that will just close that up and protect the cable. So I'll just cut those. And then all I want to do is put some glue either side, and then along the edge just like that, maybe a little on this edge as well, just to make sure it all stays nicely in place. And then right in the centre I just want some there to stick to the underside of the former, and then I put that in place. And that closes that gap, so when we come to fit the fairing, that will fit nicely on there. Okay, I'll just do the same to the other side, and then we'll carry on with what we're doing. Okay, so that's the cables neatly concealed. So if you recall, the original aeroplane, or the original design, was for control line, and it was covered in 1/8 balsa. The whole fuselage and the main wing was covered in 1/8 balsa, which means that when we turn over, and we have a look at the underside, where the wing comes in here and the fuselage meets it, this would have been sheeted. So what I'll do is, using a piece of 1/16 balsa, I will connect to the wing, and I'll shape that round the fuselage so that we get a nice smooth flowing connection there, so that when we come to cover, it'll all cover quite nicely. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll do that, and I'll show you what it looks like once it's covered, so that I can better explain what it is that I'm doing here. Okay, so what I've done is, in order to help with the connection to the wing, I've just put some 16th balsa to make that, to take away the gap where the wing sat just behind this former. And now what I've done also, in order to help with the fairings fitting, when they come to be fitted in a little while, they'll sit in there with a nice curve on them, in order to to make the wing blend into the side of the body. What I've done is I've just made a little profile of the wing there in 16th balsa, so very, very thin, and I'm going to fasten that onto the top of the wing, and onto the fuselage, and then that will then curve round underneath and meet the bits that I've put on the bottom. And then what that will do is that will allow the fairing to sit properly, and I'll just try and show you what I mean. That will allow the fairing to fasten down in like that, and fit correctly against the side of the fuselage. Because remember, the original model, the control line model that we've sort of taken this from, was covered all over with 1/8 balsa. So just going to put those thin sheets on the side. So I'll stick those on now, and all I'm going to do is put a very thin bit of glue along the bottom, glue along the top here where it connects, and a little bit onto each of these formers, and I'm just going to fit that on. I'll show you what that looks like in just 1 second. Okay, so I'm just going to put that on upright at the moment, and then I'll curve the back and I'll curve the front round once that's all stuck on. So that's perfectly vertical at the moment. So the last thing to do really is to put the fairings on. Now what I've done with these is I soaked them in water. They're 1/16 balsa or 1.6mm balsa. I soaked them in water, curved them, put a bit of a curve on them, and then I put some elastic bands around them to hold them in that position. They've now fully dried out, so what we'll find when I take the elastic off is that they will retain that curve now, and so I'll be able to fit those on, and we'll be able to press those down a little bit, and we'll get that really good curve, or that nice smooth curve coming up to the side of the aircraft like that. And then what I'll have to do with the front is I'll need to maybe dampen that again and bend it round so that we can get that perfect fit there. But well, that seems to be going quite well. So I think in the first instance, if I just stick this part down and this part, and then once that's fully stuck down, I'll be able to then curve this in and get the get the right sort of profile at this front end. Okay, and so that's how the fairings are going to go on. So I've managed to get this back end stuck in place, and we've got this nice nice shape. So when that part's connected, fully set, then we'll be able to adjust this front end and bring that in. But I don't want to do that just yet, because it might just lift the fairing away from the body of the plane further back. Okay, so the fairings are now on at this back end, with the front end still loose and this back end still loose, which will go round underneath there. So what I'm going to do, because these have got a curve, and now I want them to curve slightly in the opposite direction, so it'll be like a double curve. What I'm doing is I'm just getting a little bit of water on a brush, and I'm just just putting that onto this. It's only 16th balsa, but what this water will do is it'll make it a little bit more flexible so that I can bend it under and then fasten it on so that it'll be like that, and we'll have this nice smooth shape going all the way up. So I think that's probably enough now. So if I just put a little bit of glue along there, and then I'll just be able to pin it all into place, just like that, and that'll and I think that'll make quite a nice nice join there. Okay, now if I just put a pin straight down there into the centre part, the wing spar where the balsa goes through the centre of the two plywood bits, that should hold that quite nicely. And if I just get another pin, use one of these long ones, I'll just pin that straight into the leading edge, straight down there, and that'll hold that all in place. There we go. Okay, so you can see how that blends nicely in now all the way around. So what I'll do, the last thing I need to do with this fairing is the back end, and I'll show you what I do with that. It'll be a similar process. I'll just dampen this a little bit, fold it in, and get that all to blend in really nicely. And that's how okay, so that's the fairing fitted, and you can see how smooth that makes the connection now between the wing and the fuselage. So I think to all intents and purposes the main build is now completed. So I'm going to end this video here, but what I'm going to do in the next video is I'll be making the cowl for the cockpit, and I'll be doing all the finishing touches, and then I'll be covering the aeroplane. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.